said, and began without waiting to make sure everyone did the same. He just expected it. I Jesu navn. The Norwegian words flowed around the table, a daily reminder of their heritage, a heritage that Jorg Bronson Hossfuss Sr. had capitalized on as a way to the wealth that built a warehouse, office buildings, and, as Pearl recently discovered, some of the tenements where her pupils lived, as well as the Hossfuss estate on Lakeshore Drive. Pearl brought her thoughts back in time to join the others in the Amen. Was that why her father allowed her to teach at the settlement house? As a way of atonement for his investments? Or, as she had suspected more than once, was it because teaching was the only permissible position for his elder daughter, who refused to become a leader in the society where his new wife thrived? After 9 years of marriage, Amalia was not new, but Pearl always thought of her that way. "Thank you," she responded, as the maid set a gilt-edged flat bowl centered on a matching gilt-edged plate in front of her. "Fishball soup tonight." Inga, direct from the old country, cooked all manner of meals, but was truly in her element when she could serve true Norwegian fare. "How was school today?" her father asked his son. "All right. I made an A on that composition about the wreck of the HF, thanks to the information you gave me." Mr. Hossfuss shook his head. The HF, standing for Hossfuss, had been one of his ships, veteran of many Atlantic crossings, but had sunk in a freak storm on Lake Michigan. "And you, Pearl, have you a good report also?" His mandatory question asked, he nodded to the maid to remove his soup dish. "Yes," but she made no effort to continue. He never bothered to listen. "Mrs. Smithson said that she'd heard your headmistress saying what a superb teacher you are." Amalia patted her mouth with her napkin. "I know that makes your father very proud of you." Pearl knew no such thing. Once, back when she was his princess, she had thought that, but no longer. He did his duty by her. He would never bear to have someone say he had shirked his duty, but with that taken care of, he relegated her to things past. Wishing she were up in the nursery with the younger children, Pearl finished her dinner, waited for her father and stepmother to adjourn to the parlor for their evening together. Then she and Jorg headed for the second floor in the west wing, the floor devoted to children. "Did you see the stage since I remade it for Arnett and Anna?" "No. When did you finish?" "Last night. So they will be able to give their first performance for Father's birthday. Right on schedule. He'll have to believe you had a hand in the script." "No one will tell him." She'd already made sure of that. All the credit would go to Arnett and Anna, who, while they were 10 months apart, looked more alike than many twins. "Do you think Father will like our surprise?" "He better." "Of course he will. After all, it's about when he came to America. How many times has he told you the story?" Jorg grinned. "I can't count that high." Jealousy was one of the 7 deadly sins, and Pearl had to fight it off on a regular basis. On one hand, she rejoiced for her younger brothers and sister, but on the other, if only her father would grace her with the smiles she remembered from before, then— But it was always before life had changed in an instant. Accidents happened. That's why they were called accidents. "Are you having your class do a play this year?" Jorg asked. "I'd like to." Ignoring the memory of the extra-long hours she'd put in to make the play a success, she thought only to the faces of her pupils, the smiles, the excited jabbering, the fear overcome. Could she manage to create such a production again, or had her children last year been especially gifted? "I'll help you." She turned to her brother. "Tusen Dank, and more." He sketched a bow. "You have no idea what it will cost you." Her laugh made his smile widen. That night, as she prepared for bed, Pearl opened her Bible to Psalm 91, one of her favorites. She recited it aloud as she loosened her corset, sliding the bone-ridged garment down so she could step out of it. She hung it in the chifforobe, lifting her dressing-gown off the hook at the same time. "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in Him will I trust. Surely He shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler, and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover thee with His feathers, and under His wings thou shalt trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler." She turned the pages to verses 14 and 16, her latest verses to consign to memory. She read one verse aloud, reciting it again as she sat to brush her hair the required 100 strokes. "Dark like honey, left in the hive over winter, that glinted fire when sparked by sunlight, the strands rippled down her back." She could call one of the maids to come brush it for her, but she knew they were busy cleaning up from supper. The pitcher of water, still warm for her to wash her face, was a luxury. Bathing in the bathroom was also a luxury, but there was something special about the privacy of her own room. And besides, this was the time she used to spend with her mother, a sacred hour just before bedtime, when Anna asked about her day, told her stories of when she was little after coming from Norway, and always, the most delicious, brushed her hair, and allowed her daughter to brush hers. Ah, the rippling gold of her mother's hair! Pearl's had never held the sheen and silkiness of her mother's. She stared at the face in the slightly wavy mirror. She knew she looked like her mother, straight nose, full lips, and eyebrows with a tendency to arch, both in question or amusement. Except for the side she kept turned from the light. Always there was an except. But her mother had been a beauty, so why didn't the similar features do the same for her daughter? Was it the touch of her father's square chin, his wider brow, the tiny gap between her two front teeth? Beauty was in the eyes of the beholder, or so the old saying went, and her eyes always saw only the almost, the not quite. She folded back the covers and stroked her hand over the warmed sheets. Marlene had been busy with the warming pan, a long-handled round pan filled with coals that she stroked between the sheets. Settled with 2 pillows propped behind her so she could read, Pearl opened her book, carefully placing the leather bookmark beyond where she was reading. Nothing gave her more pleasure than a good book. Even though she'd read Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility before, she lost herself in the story, finally turning off the gaslight when her eyes grew too heavy to stay open. In the darkness of her room, she watched the branches outside her window dance in the wind. As a child, they'd frightened her, but now they'd become old friends. Lord, what is to become of me? Am I to remain here in my Father's house, doing His bidding, for the rest of my life? Is there not another place for me? Perhaps even a husband? I hate to sound like a whining woman, but I'm nearly 23, an old maid in everyone's eyes. Is that your will for me? She paused.